fellow heathens, it's Liz, and I'm here with a new fun tag, hashtag if each golden girl were a tarot deck. So with the advent of Betty White's passing, I am a huge fan of the Golden Girls. I have been since my childhood. You know, I grew up, my mom watched it and I watched it, and every time I did, I went to bed with this sense of wholesomeness. And even though, you know, there were some parts of the show that probably were not meant for kids, but it was just a feel-good show because it was about friendship and love and just caring for each other despite our differences and getting along anyway. And so I was thinking about, you know, how could I honor the Golden Girls' legacy by creating a tag that kind of looked at each character and tried to disseminate what a matching tarot deck would be for them. So I have a few, and I actually have a bonus deck that I want to share with you. So we're going to start with number 1, Rose, which this would be your sweet deck, your deck that you feel comfortable with, and you don't have to do a lot of thinking when you work with it. So for a Rose deck, I chose the Guardian Angel Tarot, and I chose this because this is my hug deck. This is a deck that I don't have to, you know, do a lot of work with understanding the messages, and I don't have to, it just tells me clear and plain and in simple terms what the message is and the action that I should take. And so this was definitely, for me, very appropriate to assign to Rose. Of course, you know, there's roses everywhere in this deck, but also with the vintage photographs and the lace, it does feel vintage and old-fashioned in a way, but it's soft and it's comforting, and I enjoy it every time I use it. Just, you know, even with the soft pink, and I edged this in pink as well, it just has that heart-centered feel. And I think that that's where Rose, the character, shined, was because, you know, she had a lot of wisdom to impart, but she didn't need to get complicated in order to deliver that message. She told you in simple terms, and it always came from the heart. And that's where she, you know, lived her life. And so this deck, for me, is the deck that I have for Rose, which would be the sweet deck that brings you comfort and you don't have to think a lot about when you read with it. Next up would be Dorothy. So this is your sarcastic deck. This is the deck that kind of looks at you and gives you a message that is kind of like, well, you should know that already, you know, and I can't believe that you even asked me this question. So a deck that delivers your message very potently and poignantly, and not so much in simple terms like Rose, but in a way that kind of like gives you a swat on the butt, like, come on now, really? And for me, that deck is the Touchstone Tarot. And the reason why this deck to me screams Dorothy is because of the way that the characters, a lot of them, are looking at you. So, you know, and they all have these facial features that are very easy to recognize. And I don't know if we'll see the one that I'm thinking of, but I just love how, you know, the characters, they're your friends. And above all, Dorothy, this is the one. Yeah, look, she's like, there's no doubt about how she's feeling about what's happening with these doors, right? So Dorothy would just sit and she would listen, you know, and you'd be laughing because you know that what Sophia or what Rose or Blanche are saying is totally ludicrous, and you know it's offending her. Dorothy, but you know, she's just gonna sit through it and then she's gonna give you a wisecrack at the end of it. So this deck for me sits through my questions, and at the end of it, I get kind of a sarcastic tone in a way. You know, like, look at the look on her face, and it's kind of like they're beckoning you here, but it's kind of like you're comfortable with these characters, and that's kind of where I think of Dorothy. And it also has a very sophisticated feel as well. And Dorothy, you know, she's the smart one. She's the regal one, the one who's always responsible. And I get that majestic feel from this deck that Dorothy kind of portrays as well as in her character. So my Dorothy deck, my smart, sarcastic, witty deck that looks at you straight, is going to be the Touchstone Tarot by Cat Black. The next deck would be a SOPHIA deck, and this is a deck that tells you stories and pulls no punches and gets to the heart of the matter really quickly. Like, there's no filter. And for me, that deck is the Spacious Tarot. And for a lot of people, this deck, you know, is very soft and very open, and you know, in a lot of ways, SOPHIA was kind of closed-minded. But for me, the Spacious Tarot is like, there's no people in it, so there's nothing to really distract you from the message. It's very clear. It's very blatant for me. And in the quartz, the animals tell a story. So for example, in the quartz, you have the child, the explorer, the guardian, and the elder. So if we're going to talk about telling stories, this deck does that very well in the quartz. So you see the progression in what the child is doing and how it's looking at life and the perspective it takes, to the exploration of the explorer and moving with that suit and that element onto new things, and then the guardian and how the creativity and the control of the suit is beginning to come about. And then you see in the elder the mastery, right? So there's a story happening here in the suits. And I feel that with SOPHIA, that was her thing. You know, every message was tied up in a story, and sometimes, you know, the story was long, but it was entertaining, and you understood it at the end, right? So although she's very sarcastic too, just like Dorothy, she pulled no punches. And that's kind of what this deck does for me. SOPHIA was, you know, the oldest of the four. And in some ways, this deck is very timeless because it doesn't have people in it. So there's no clothing to date the deck at all. And they're just elements from nature that really don't age at all. So in that way, this deck to me is very timeless, just like SOPHIA. And the messages that I get from it are very in your face, because the element speaks for itself, you know. And I get the message, especially in this card, because this is my favorite temperance card of all time. You have those opposing elements, and then you have the way through, but you have to change in order to do it. And I think that SOPHIA would tell a story to get at a message like this very well. So my SOPHIA deck, my pull no punches deck, my tell it straight and tell it in a story form, would be the Spacious Tarot. Now for Blanche, I had to think, what would a deck symbolize for Blanche? Like, who is Blanche? Blanche is very sexy. She's very luxurious. you know, and she's very sassy too, right? So the deck that I have in my collection that I feel would best represent those energies and the messages that I get is the Elemental Wisdom Tarot. This deck, and a lot of people, you know, it had its share of a little bit of controversy, but it's very body beautiful. And the backs are just so stunning. And the cardstock, it is that like rose petal finish that you either love it or you hate it, but it's just so just beautiful, you know. And I think that this is one of my most beautiful decks. Of course, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and it can change depending on what you view as beautiful, but when I read with it, yes, the luxurious nature of the tactile feel of the deck comes through first. But the messages are clear. I have to listen to the deck in a way. And that's kind of like what Blanche was. Like, you listen to her. She was the center of attention. So sometimes I have to kind of navigate a little bit of what the deck is trying to say, but the message always comes out in the end. Again, it's just beautiful, luxurious, and a joy to use. So this is the Elemental Wisdom Tarot by Taroteca Studio. And now lastly, as an honorable mention, I couldn't do this tag without mentioning Stan. So I had to think, what is Stan about, right? The first thing that popped into my head was his mustache. Yes, his toupee, but more so his mustache. And of course, I don't know, maybe you're thinking about a deck that maybe you're guessing what it is, and you're probably right. But my honorable mention for Stan would be the Morgan Greer Tarot, because of all of the mustaches. Stan is very self-conscious. You know, he's definitely a womanizer, and I don't get that vibe from this deck, but the mustaches just killed me. You know, when I thought of this deck and I thought of Stan, because he was such a major character on the show, I had to pick this one. This is a deck that I've had for a long time, from the beginning of my tarot journey, just about. And I've kept it because it's so colorful, and Stan was a very colorful character. And, you know, sometimes the colors clash. There's another mustache. Sometimes the colors clash, and that's kind of like, he clashed with the girls. He clashed very strongly with them all. And, you know, but there was something comforting and warm about him as well. So they couldn't get rid of him completely. And so when I use this deck, I'm looking for that nostalgia. I'm looking, just like Dorothy, you know, she looked at Stan as a piece of her past. And that's kind of what this deck stands for in my life. So for Stan, as the honorable mention, that would be the Morgan Greer Tarot. So thank you for joining me for this special tag in honor of the Golden Girls. I will put the description of the items, you know, if you wanted to do a VR to this tag, I will put the items in the description box so that you will be able to remember who and what they stand for. And of course, if you interpret these characters in a different way, I'd love to hear about it. You know, what was the most meaningful aspect of the show for you, and which character did you relate to the most? And I guess for me, that would have to be Dorothy. If I had to choose a deck from all of these, it would be Dorothy. And I think, you know, that's kind of like, I am very sarcastic when I talk to people, just because it's just how I am, and it's not meant in a mean way. But, you know, I do stick up for myself, and I know that Dorothy had a difficult time with that. She also loves to read, and so do I. And I love my alone time, and so did Dorothy. So which character do you identify with the most, and what decks in your collection do you think would match up with each character? So for now, I bid you adieu, and I will see you guys again soon. Take care. Bye. As always, thanks for watching, and if you found value in this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more tarot-related content like this. Ring that bell to be notified whenever I upload new stuff, and don't forget to listen closely to the whispers of the heathen within that already has the answer and knows the path that's right for you. Until next time, be brave, be bold, be you. Bye.